So now I do have the pleasure of introducing our next speakers, Pastor Gene Lovelace, who I've known for many, many, many years. And Gene is, he's got a whole thing. He was a live hospice for many, many years. He's come out of retirement. He's now working at Monogram Health, which is a huge company that's providing service now. But that's not the point. The point is he is a person who has, he does God's work. That's it. He does God's work. He helps the people who are dying, right? And there are lots of people who do God's work. The teachers, the social workers, the nurses, they all do God's work. My son is actually going to be a teacher. And so I'm very proud of him because he's going to do wonderful things when he's young. But, in his future. But Gene has been doing this his whole career. And so he sees what it is that people really think about when the time really is coming. And I wanted him to share that with you all because I want you to think about what are the priorities in your life, right? Like I told you, I spend all my time just kind of working all the time, which is not awesome for me. But because of programs like this, I hope we can all start to think about those priorities. My friend Gene Lovelace.
You set it up so solemn, Eric. I was going to say to Dr. Snow, how do I follow this? I barely do PowerPoint presentations. You have videos. You bring in animals to show as a part of it. But I did think of something I might do that would fit if we could bring in the lions and tigers and bears. Because, you know what? How does that sound to you when you think about the lions and tigers and bears? To me, it's like laying awake at night and you can't go to sleep because what is on your mind keeps rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. And that's the way I describe it to my patients and to my clients. The lions and tigers and bears have come out, haven't they? And we're trying to manage that. So my segue into how shall we now live can be with when the lions and tigers and bears come out. Top button? Okay. I learned early in my career, I spent almost 30 years with a live hospice, which I'm really proud will celebrate its 50th anniversary on Tuesday, one of the oldest hospices in the United States. And back when we started, it was all volunteers, and it's evolved to be a very successful program there in Nashville. But when I began my work there, I started paying attention to what my patients could teach me about dying and about living. And so I decided who would be my best teachers would be my patients. I want to tell you about a couple of them. Three points in my little talk today. This is the first point. The first patient was named Grover. So one of the nightmares of a home care clinician is to have to go do admission work. Because we have a whole special team who goes in and talks with the patient and talks about all the forms you've got to sign to get started. And it's horrible for somebody like me. Well, I get a call from my boss and says, hey, Chaplain, I know you hate to do this, but we've got a load of admissions. You're going to have to do a mission on Monday morning. I say, okay, well, I'll make it my way through it. Give me the name, and so you got to stop at the office, pick the packet up. The guy wants you to come at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. Now, if you've ever done home care work, that just doesn't happen. Patients don't say, be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, do they? So I fight traffic. I carry my little packet to Grover's house. I pull up in the driveway. There's a big flag flying. I walk toward the door. The house is neat and tidy. Even the rocks up to the porch are painted white. So, this describes Grover. And so I knock on the door. As soon as I almost knock on the door pops open. He grabs my name tag, reads it. Yeah, you're the guy going to do the paperwork. Come on in. We sit down in his living room. We go through all the papers we have to fill out. He has lots of questions. Many of them I can't really answer very well. But I say, this is what your doctor wants you to do. He agreed to sign the papers. We get through. I breathe a sigh of relief. And I take my papers back to the office and think, boy, I hope I don't have to do that very often. About 4 o'clock that day, my boss called me, and she said, Mr. Smith called us and said you came by, and I went, what am I going to get in trouble about? He says, no, everything's fine, except there was one form that got left out. And so you're going to have to go tomorrow and go get Grover Smith to sign the papers. And I went, great. Call Mr. Smith up. I said, Mr. Smith, I know when I was there to visit you, you said, I don't want a lot of visitors. I've got a lot of things to do. You guys can come in, but I want you in and out. But I'm going to have to come tomorrow because I forgot to get one more paper signed. He said, okay. Be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. So, I get up sunrise and battle the traffic through Nashville and get to Grover's house. And as I get to the door, before I can push the doorbell, the door flies open. It sort of startles me. I said, oh, hey, Mr. Smith, how's it going? He goes, how's it going? Come back here, son. What's going on here? So we walk through his house. We go through the living room. We start going down a hall. I see the kitchen, and I see these rooms. And we go to the very end of the hall, and it's his bedroom. And I think, I don't know where this is going. And he points to a clock on the top of the dresser. He said, you see that up there? I said, yes, sir. What is that? I said, it's a clock. And I thought I was going to get a lecture about, if you're on time, you're late. But I didn't get that lecture. He said, you see that clock? And it was one of those old clocks that, you remember the kind that flip? It goes, flip the things, the time. You see that clock? I said, yes, sir. I watch that clock every night. I said, you do? 11:58, 11:59, 12 o'clock. I got another one. This is the way this man is living his life, celebrating the gift of another day. I started thinking, what a great way if we could live that way. If we celebrated every day, I think sometimes my patients are advantaged because they have the line drawn out there and they live a different life than those of us who just live toward the future that we don't really know where that's headed. But they live very intentional. And so Grover gives me the message, I got another one. And I think we would live better lives if we lived that way. Meet Mildred, another Sesame Street character. Went in to visit Mildred, and we were talking about things and talking about how her health was going. And I said, well, Mildred, we hadn't really gotten deep into where I was going. I said, so how are you dealing with all this? And she goes, oh, honey, I live on ready. And I thought, you live on ready? She goes, yeah, honey, I live on ready. I'm ready anytime. I'm just living my life, enjoying every day that I've given, but I live on ready. What would it be if we lived that way, even without illness or terminal illness? I got another one, and honey, I live on ready. Two wonderful principles that we could live a better life with, I think. Now, as I didn't do my honey on ready. See, I'm not as good as this. So my patients were teaching me to live intentionally. And I know Cindy and I have worked really hard at this since her diagnosis. People, at my 50th class reunion, I went and I had to speak, and I said, you all already come up to me and saying, you all are traveling all the time. I said, yeah, we're not going to live a life of I wish I hads. We're going to take advantage of this now. And if we, my mother had this wonderful financial principle, is to die at zero. And she said, I'm not going to leave you a lot of stuff. I'm going to give it to you now, and I'm going to watch you enjoy it. But so much of our society feels like we have to do so much planning and so much saving and so much, and we miss the opportunity to live intentionally. Well, that's what my patients really are teaching me. Live each day full and complete. I never had a patient tell me, gosh, I didn't quite get that career climb I wanted to have. I never had a patient say, I didn't make enough money. I never had a patient say, I wish I had accomplished more. I had them usually say, I wish I had traveled more. I wish I had spent some more time with my family. I wish I had worked on my spiritual life more and paid attention to things that I'm paying attention to now. That's what my patients teach me, to live intentional and to live each day full and complete. The second thing that my patients taught me, as I went into this work, there weren't a lot of hospice chaplains when I started. I was the first clinically trained chaplain in Tennessee. And I started going and visit my patients, and as they were going through this living, they started talking about certain things that they would say to their loved ones and certain things their loved ones would say back. And I started hearing this theme of things that they were saying. And about that time, a fellow named Ira Byock, wrote this book called Dying Well. I think it was in the late 90s. And it was one of the foundational books on hospice care. And in the book, Ira Byock says there's a life closure script that people just seem to be hardwired with. And they say these things. You don't have to tell them to say it. They just say them. And they need to say them, and you need to hear them as your loved one. And so the life closure script goes this way. It says, I forgive you, forgive me. Thank you, I love you, and goodbye. Now, when I went into a patient's home, and as things were moving, as this patient was moving what looks like toward their time would be finished in this world, I would say to their family, they may start saying some things that sound sort of weird. I mean, and then I go over the script, I'll say, these are some of the things they say. And I remember a little lady says, yeah, he's wearing me out with thank you. Man never said thank you for anything. And every time I come in the room, thank you for bringing my coffee. Thank you for fixing my meals. Thank you for taking such care of me. It seems that we're just hardwired to say this script and to hear this script and to say it back. The life closure script. I started thinking and tried to practice, what if we don't have to have a life-limiting illness and we live our life with that script? Except maybe for the goodbye. that we try to live our lives being current with our relationships where forgiveness is necessary, where I need to say, please forgive me, forgive you, where we truly live a life of gratitude in every day. And we say, I love you, easy off our lips. I was flying back. Cindy and I did a long trip to Ireland and Scotland and traveled with our friends, Ken and Cindy. And I was flying back on an airplane from Ireland, and I had my headphones in, and the Pit came on. You ever watch the Pit, the show? And the doctor there was telling a young family about things they needed to say to their loved one. And they said, we're not really religious or spiritual, but we need to say something. And he says, you need to do the Ho'oponopono legend. You know what that is? It's a Hawaiian, you know what it is? It's a Hawaiian legend. I have to get my glasses on to see what it is. It's a Hawaiian legend of making things right. We should live this script, not just in our dying, but in our living. And I think we would live better and happier lives. Well, that's point 2. Point 1 is live intentional. I got another one, and honey, I live on ready. And live our life being current with our need for forgiveness and gratitude and appreciation and love. There's a great mystery in dying that I was completely unaware of. And I read books. I read Kubler-Ross when in her latter years, she sort of went way off on the wheel of life, and people thinking she's like losing it. But I started listening to these patients' story, and they started telling me things that were just hard to imagine, but they just seemed so true and so real. And so I started writing them down. The stories that they would tell me about seeing things, hearing things, feeling things, knowing things that I just couldn't explain. But they gave them comfort, and they gave them peace, and they gave them meaning, and they gave them purpose. And when I would speak, and on occasions to talk about hospice work, I would tell these stories. And people would say, you need to write those things down. It needs to be a book. And I don't. But I started writing them down. And I started compiling the stories for what patients would tell me about things they would hear and see and feel and know. And so once I retired, I decided I got to finish that thing, but I can't commit. I talked to a publisher, but I can't commit. So Cindy and I were in Costa Rica a couple of years ago, and I said, I'm going to get a tattoo. I'm a sailor, got to have a tattoo. And so I'm going to get a tattoo, and I'm going to put in that tattoo the title of my book. Then it'll be public, and I'll have to finish it. So here's my tattoo, and whoops. And there's the rendering that the guy made of the tattoo that I have. It's sort of my anchor. Pay attention and embrace the mystery. Pay attention and embrace the mystery. Mary was a patient who lived, Eric, you would know where her house was, close to Vanderbilt. She was a retired school teacher. Her husband was a retired banker. And I would visit her. She was a good Methodist woman who liked her pastor to visit, but liked me to visit because I didn't, I'm not going to tell anything she tells me about things, especially, things that may happen at church or people. So we had regular visits. And in my visits, we would sit in her living room, we would talk, we would have prayers, we would have readings, and she'd talk about the journey of dying. And as she got more and more further along with her illness, she was living alone. She had to hire a 24-hour caregiver. And she wanted me to come every week to have prayers and readings with her. And we had that. It was a wonderful thing. And then one day, our hospice nurse says, I need you to go visit Mary because I'm afraid that she is having some fear. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, she's not sleeping at night. Her workers are visiting her. We want to give her some medicine so she can sleep at night, but she doesn't want to take it. And they know that's one of my big things. The three things that I want, my goal as a hospice chaplain, is that the patient not be afraid, that they be at peace, and they find meaning and purpose in these days. Those are the three things I work toward. So Mary seems to be afraid. So I walk in and I sit next to Mary's bed, and she's very tired. And I say, Mary, how things going? Oh, pretty good, chaplain. And we have a little conversation. I said, well, I want to ask you a question. One of our nurses said that your caregiver says that you're not sleeping at night. You seem to be battling sleep. And, you need to get a good night's rest. It's okay to take your sleeping pill. You're not going to get addicted to it. They worry about things like that, right? You're not going to get addicted to this. You need to rest. And she goes, well, you'll think I'm silly. I say, no, Mary, I don't think you're silly. She goes, I'm afraid I'll miss them. I said, you're afraid you'll miss them? She said, yeah, chaplain, it's just crazy. I lay here in my bed, and she had one of those big 4-post beds, with the high posts on. So I lay here in my bed at night, and I will have these doves fly around my bedpost night after night. And they have a ribbon in their mouth, which that's a religious symbol. And it gives me such comfort and such joy and such peace to watch the doves. I'm afraid I'll miss them. So we were going to take them away. What was Mary teaching us? Pay attention, embrace the mystery. Another patient that I had a brother-in-law who stopped by the hospice residence on his way home from work and said, I'm come by to visit you, Ralph, and see how you're doing. I'm headed to a Wednesday night prayer meeting at our church, and everybody will ask about you. I want to give a report of how things are going. And he said, well, great, tell them what's going on. So George went to church and shared with the congregation about what was going on in the life of his brother-in-law. And the pastor, as happens in some congregations, he said, well, George, would you just lead our prayer tonight? And so George stood up and led the prayer, expressing the things that had been shared with the congregation and said things about his brother-in-law. The next day, George stopped by to visit his brother-in-law on his way home again. And he said, well, I went by church, everybody asked about you, and they wanted to see how things were going. It's so good to get the report from you. And he goes, oh, yes, and I loved your prayer, Ralph. I loved your prayer, George. He said, what? See, I just was laying here and I just sort of heard the words. I can't explain it. But it gave them great comfort of things beyond this world, that they were paying attention and embracing the mystery. One more story, which I wish I could say I got copies of the books to sell you for. One was, so I had a young patient. She was in her late 40s, early 50s. And she had children who lived all around the United States and one child that was living overseas in the military. And it looked like things were winding down, and our goal was to try to, our goal is to try to give, what does this timeline look like? And here's what you could expect at all these stages. That's a lot of what hospice does. It takes away the fear because we tell them what's going to happen and what we're going to do to address the things. And all of a sudden they just sort of relax. But we were telling her things seemed to be winding down, and she was concerned that all of her kids were not going to get in to visit her. So they tried their best, but with their busy schedules and travel plans, they couldn't all make it. And so she was very concerned. She could talk to her children on the phone. That was before we had FaceTime and the technology we had. But she said, I just wish I could see them. And I just threw up the idea, Jill, just pray about it. Who knows? Just pray that somehow you'll find a way to ease this in your soul of not being able to see your children. A couple days later, I went by to visit her, and I talked with her husband outside. I went back to visit her. She was very weak and very tired, and I said, how's it going? And she goes, oh, Chaplain, this is strange, but you won't believe the dream I had right after you visited that night. I said, what do you mean? Tell me about it. She goes, well, you remember that show, The Flying Nun? You remember The Flying Nun with Sally Field? She goes, it was like I was the flying nun. And all night long, I was flying around. And I would fly over a house. And all of a sudden, it was one of my children's house. And the roof would come off the house. And they would wave at me. And it's okay. It's okay. So, I pass this message along to you, my friends. How do we now live? We live an intentional life. We practice the I forgive you, forgive me, thank you, I love you. We pay attention. We embrace the mystery. Thank you.
Look at that. Why don't you guys put his slide back up? All right, let's do it. Come on, June. Come on. Let us all do this together. And we're going to do this now together because I know every single one in this room has someone that they love who they wish they could say this to right now. Let's go. I forgive you. Forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Right. So say that today. Say that tomorrow. Say that for the rest of your life because it's all we can do. Terrible. Let me cry at weddings. Horrifying. I will tell you, I cried at my own wedding. And when you cry, it's like, time stops. You know what I'm talking about. And so, I was crying. And I looked out in the audience, and all the women were like this because they didn't want their mascara to get all messed up. Oh, my gosh. But anyway, please do this, right? Because all of us are only given one gift.